Um, we are lucky to be joined by some actually wildly successful single band contesters from the Southeast region. Joe and Doug and Jeff will talk about their experiences on single band, and it's something to consider for all of us here in the Southeast. So what I've asked the presenters to do is to talk just a little bit about their approaches and strategies to single band contesting, and I think each of them will have their own specific details about what they do, and it may be oriented more in one direction than the other. But they'll talk for 10, 12 minutes or so, and then we'll have time and we'll just do all three presentations in a row. And then we'll have time for questions and discussion, because I'm sure all of us will have something to contribute. So Joe, you're good to go first, right?
Yep, sure am.
All right, you have the floor, sir.
All right, thanks. Good evening, everybody. I did not get a chance to prepare official slide deck for this, but I did prepare talking notes that I can publish on the Reflector, so that if somebody wants to take a look at what I talked about tonight, they can get a copy of that. So to start out with, just a minutes worth of background on myself. I've been fairly seriously contesting since probably the very early 2000s, so a little over 20 years. And I've always had a big interest in 160 meters. For some reason, it's such a painful band for a small lot. I've never lived on acreage, so it's always been quarter acre lots and less than 1 acre lots. And I'll get into some of those challenges. In 2014, I joined PBRC and was quickly invited to captain the 160 meter station for Frank W3LPL. And I did that for 4 years. And under Frank's mentorship, I learned then a lot about 160 meters, 160 meter antennas, propagation. And it was a real treat to operate a station like that. He has a first-rate station on all HF bands, but on 160, it was just amazing. And I got so spoiled working that. To go back home to work my station in 160 contest was a real drag after coming from Frank's. But needless to say, Frank put us to work. So we worked on a lot of antennas. We got a lot of hands-on experience, and he's a wealth of information in all things contesting. So with that, I'll just lead into my talking points here. So some of the challenges on 160 meters that I just mentioned are, especially for those of us that are on smaller lots, are antenna challenges. Even on larger lots, there's always antenna challenges on 160. The antennas are big. You have to have a good transmit antenna. You have to have some receive antennas. You have to get all that stuff working well. There's interference problems, especially if you're working multiband with that. So there's a lot of challenges to get a 160 meter station to play correctly and play well. Some of the other challenges on working 160 contest are being able to stay up all night. So the challenges of being able to get some good sleep a week leading up to the contest, and then learning how to take good naps on the daytime periods so that you're charged back up again, you get something to eat, and you're back in the chair at an hour before sunset. And you're in the chair usually till 2 or 3 in the morning. You take a little nap, and then you're back up again an hour before sunset or sunrise. And usually I stay on till maybe 1 or 2 hours after sunrise. And it's amazing how many contacts you can make on 160 after the sun comes up here in the United States, local contacts. and you can really add to your score. I'll talk more about that later. One of the other big challenges on 160 meters is actually working DX. So if you don't have the antenna systems for it, DX becomes very difficult. So you have to learn how to adapt and be able to really start to work more local stateside stations to try to compensate for the inabilities to work DX. From South Carolina, so I was in Maryland. I've been in South Carolina for 2 years. The beauty of South Carolina is VKJA is a lot easier from South Carolina than it was in Maryland. But we get a penalty for working EU from South Carolina because of the path losses. So it makes it a little more difficult to the EU from here. But anyway, that all leads back to trying to put up a good antenna on 160. Some of the advantages to a single band contest, and especially with 160 or 10 meters, or any single band effort, is there's no band change decisions required. So the beauty of that is you just jump on. You're not going to have to worry about catching openings on 10 meters, 15 meters, or all that. There's nothing to worry about. You just get on. You're locked into a single band, and you kind of hope for good propagation and hope for the best, because that's all you have. And the other advantage, and there could be a disadvantage, but it's primarily a nighttime operation. So if you're just going to do it casually, it frees up daytime activities. So the daytime hours are free when you're working 160 meter contests. Let's talk a little more about the antennas, because that's probably a very important thing if you're going to get on and try to actually be competitive in 160 contests. Transmit and receive. So you can just take, just to give you an example of what I have here, I have one single antenna, wire antenna here. It's an end-fed half-wave antenna that's set up for 80 meters. So it's 130 couple feet long. And I have 50 radials underneath that. I'm on 0.8 of an acre here. And I have 80-foot tall pine trees all over the backyard. So I'm lucky that I have tall supports. But I'm in an HOA here as well, and I have to maintain a very low profile. So I have that antenna strung through the woods, and I have a switch box that will convert it from the end-fed half wave to a quarter wave inverted L on 160 meters. So it's a very simple setup, and it works very well here. But some other examples of transmit antennas could be load up what you got. You'll be surprised that if you load up maybe an 80 meter dipole, or something that's fed with open wire line, maybe a doublet, 130 foot doublet, or something like that, you can get those playing well enough on 160 meters usually to actually make a lot of contacts and have a lot of fun. One of the other keys, if you don't have room for radials, you can use what is called a folded counterpoise, and that's something that K2AV has developed. And I put a note to see k2av.com for all the details on not only setting up the the folded counterpoise, but how to get your inverted L playing the best it can play. Another important thing on 160 is a receive antenna, and that can be very simple as well. So here I just have a 200-foot bog, a beverage on ground. So it's just a wire that simply lays on the ground, and it's oriented to the northeast. And it's fed with a piece of RG6, 75 ohm cable TV coax, and a little transformer out there, and a ground rod at both ends. Very simple. And it's amazing how much that little bog helps out to reduce storm noise that might be coming from the west from here, or reduce local QRN or something like that. So I can just hear stations a little better from the EU. A beverage antenna is a good choice. That's an antenna that's a simple wire antenna that's 7 or 8 foot above ground. Those can be made in two directions. The beverage on ground can be made in two directions. There's ways to do that. There's also something called a K9 AY loop, and that's a loop that you can set up that can give you some advantages in four directions. And it takes up a very compact small space, maybe a 25-foot support in the middle and maybe 30 or 40 feet in diameter. So it does not take up much room. And if you can only put up one direction, point it to Europe. From here, that's probably the best advantage. It's densely populated in Europe, and that's probably a good choice if you can put something up. And if you can't put it in any direction, you can, and you still might get some benefit out of a receive antenna that way. Another easy receive antenna is just use one of your other dipoles. So maybe a 40-meter dipole, a 20-meter dipole, something like that. Anything that can reduce noise levels without severely reducing the signal strength, so that you can improve signal to noise ratios, are beneficial for receive antennas on 160. So it doesn't have to be fancy. There's plenty of contests on 160. So if you want to get some practice, for example, ARRL has the 160 contest. That's CW, obviously. Most of the 160 contests are CW, except CQ does have a single sideband contest on 160. That's the only one I know of that's on 160. Very simple reports, RST plus your ARRL section. You can operate for the full 48 hours in that contest. So that's an advantage for people that really want to put a lot of time in the chair. You can literally get on and operate the 48-hour period. CQ160 has the CWN single sideband portions. That's just RST plus your state. You can operate 30 of the 48 hours on that one. Another very fun contest is the Stu Perry Top Band Distance Challenge. That's CW. That's the exchange there is simply your grid square, your 4-character grid square. You can operate 14 of the 24 hours, and those happen 4 times a year. There's one in December, which is the main event. There's one in the spring, there's one in the summer, and then there's one in the fall. Another opportunity to operate 160 contests single band are the ARRL and CQ worldwide events. Those contests offer the ability to operate single band, and you can be both CW and single sideband for those. And then the weekly CWT. So the beauty of that is the late session on the weekly CWT is perfectly timed for propagation on 160. So when you're over there, it works out very well. And then you can get off of that and try to work some DX while you're at it. So that's a weekly chance of getting on 160 and trying your hand at some contesting. Some of the strategies that I go by here, I choose a contest category that I can compete in. So I kind of learned I was stubborn for many years on running high power on 160 and just getting killed by the other stations that are running high power with good antennas. There's no way in the world you're going to compete with those guys. And I was stubborn and I was having fun making lots of contacts, but never placing well at all in a contest. I mean, I'd just get blown away by all the big guys. Finally found out that low power was the way to go. And I literally sold, when I moved to South Carolina, I sold the amplifier, sold all the high power gear. And, I'm just running the Flex 6600M with 100 watts now with that single wire antenna outside in the trees at about 50 feet. And I found that on 160, I've become very competitive with that setup. Run assisted on 160, you'll find it very beneficial, especially finding DX with using a telnet cluster, because on 160, it may be very difficult if you don't have good receive antennas to start tuning around and finding the DX on your own. The DX clusters will definitely give you clues on where DX is, and it gives you a chance to work them as you see them come up on the cluster. So That's pretty important. Keep an eye on the reverse beacon network for your own transmitted signal. So you really want to know, or I do anyway, on where I'm being spotted at in the world. That gives me some clues on propagation, and it gives me some clues on maybe, I'll start running somewhere clear in a band where if I know that I've got a strong signal into Europe at their sunrise, then I might be able to attract some of those callers from Europe. Or if I'm strong into the West Coast, I might try to start concentrating on some search imbalance and working a lot of my West Coast multipliers when I know my signal's strong there. So I kind of keep an eye on that, and I make decisions based on that, whether I'm going to run or search and pounce. On 160, it's very important to maximize your maximize your op times for multipliers. So, and those are the productive times you have to find. So such as using gray line propagation, understanding the EU sunrise, European sunrise, and then our US sunrise and sunset. Those are time periods where DX becomes much easier to work on 160 meters. There's a couple 3 hour window for a European sunrise. And then again, for the US on our sunrise and sunset, there's windows there that allow us to work DX that we will not be able to work once we get through our sunrise and sunsets. So you have to pay attention to those and maximize your multipliers during those time periods. As a single operator on a small lot on 160, you have to maximize what they call the butt in chair time. It's critical that if you're going to be competitive, you really have to plan on staying in the chair for very long periods of time and operating. That's kind of what I found, over the years, that, you can't you can't fool around, take a lot of breaks, take a long dinner break, or take an evening break and then expect to come back and be competitive in one of these contests. It's just not going to happen as a small operator or a low power station with poor antennas. It's you really have to keep chipping away at it constantly to keep up with the competition. I'd keep an eye also on the online scoreboards. So over the last 5 years, the online scoreboards have become very popular, where you're actually reporting your score out in real time, and there's a way to look at those. And I find that to be highly motivational because I know who my competition is on 160 pretty much almost every contest. And I like to know where I'm at compared to them, so that if it makes, if I want to try to take a break at 3 a.m., I might go the extra mile and stay on all night, because I know that, I'm going to try to make, some extra contacts, and hopefully he'll not make it through the night, or things like that. So the online scoreboard gives you an idea of what your competition is doing in real time, when they're taking breaks, and how well they're doing. And then if you can't work a lot of DX, if you don't have the antenna system for it, then you really have to try to compensate with making as many local, and that's like stateside or anything stateside, anything you can hear, work them and get them into the log, because it's very hard in some of these contests. You get there's a points difference for working DX, especially in Stu Perry. Excuse me. The points are pretty high for working Europeans and VK, JA, and you're probably not going to be able to make up for that with just working a bunch of extra local cues for 2 pointers. So, but in some of the contests, you can try to make up for it and try to compensate for it like that. I think one of the best things I found for trying to compensate is to stay on Saturday and Sunday mornings, hours past sunrise. So I've sometimes made as many as 100 extra cues by staying on that extra hour or two on a Saturday or Sunday morning, and long past the sun has risen. And you would think that you still can't work them, but you can still work the Midwest from here pretty easily. well up into 9 o'clock or so in the morning. Excuse me. So there's a skill set that you'll find that you have to develop on 160, and that's basically listening to weak signals at or below the noise level. So, excuse me. Signals on 160 can become very weak, and with the QRN and QSB, it takes some training to be able to hear them, pick them out, and work them. You got to learn how to work with the QSB. Sometimes you need to vary your code speed, sometimes the timing, to ride the QSB wave, and just keep resending your information. Never give up on trying to work somebody on 160 because of QSB. They will eventually hear you and get your information and get the exchange. It may take sometimes 5 tries to work some of these DX stations, but everybody knows that, and everybody has enough patience to work them. So don't give up on if you can't work them in the first couple of tries. Don't give up. Just keep on going. The next thing on 160 is the band plan. So on EU, you have to, they can't go below 110 or 1810. So make sure that you're working above 1810 on 160 to work the Europeans. There's also a sheet that I will publish that's the best frequencies and the known bad frequencies from European perspective. So there are a list, and there's some windows that are better frequencies to work on Europeans on 160, and it's a color-coded list, and I'll publish that as well. Also, there's a DX window on 160 that's between 1830 and 1835, and sometimes you can go through there and pick out, DX. That gets trampled on pretty quickly. That's not highly respected anymore, but you can find a lot of DX in that window, and try to work some DX through there. The other thing I would say, as far as the radio is concerned, if you do have a radio or something that you can do 2 receivers on, do an SO2V operation. If you can run on one radio and then listen on the other and be tuning around, you can start to, try to see if you can hear some DX, or, have that second radio to move around with, is beneficial. You can't do SO2R, of course, but you can at least have that second receiver and move around and see what the band's doing, and see if you can pick up some multipliers that way, and then just jump on them like that. But I think I probably went way over, but that's in a nutshell what I do on 160. Some results. The CQ CW or 160 CW in 2021. I took number 4 in the United States, number 6 North America, and then in 2022 I came back and took a number 1 in the United States, 2 in North America, and I've got very similar results for back-to-back years in ARRL 160 contests. So I'm very happy with some of those results on working those contests. But I put in a lot of time, and through the year make some antenna improvements, and keep trying to improve operating skills and the station. But it's a lot of fun, so give it a try. And if you have any questions, certainly feel free to send me an email or give me a call. I'd be more than happy to share any information I know about working 160. And to that, Andy, I will turn it back.
Well, Joe, thank you for masterclass on 160 operating. And I'm sure we do have questions, but we're going to save them. And we're going to do all 3 presentations, and then we'll have questions and presentations. So, Doug, you're up next.
Okay, good. Everybody hear me, I assume. I have been a ham. A little bit about me. I've been a ham since 1963. So I got probably most of you beat as far as longevity. I'm 77 years old. And when I was younger, I was far more energetic, of course. So over the years, I've migrated to the single band contesting. I used to work out in the Pacific as a contractor, and I was on Kwajalein and the Marshall Islands and Christmas Island out there south of Hawaii and Wake Island for a little bit. And I'll tell you what, I started contesting then, and I got really spoiled. You talk about running in a contest. When you're on Christmas Island, the VR, those used to, it's T32 now, I think it used to be VR3 when I was there years ago in the 70s. You get on a contest like the CQ Worldwide Contest, and there's no such thing as call and CQ. You got to run because they're going to be calling you. And as soon as you finish one, somebody else is going to call you. You have no choice. So as a result, back then, I could make, I don't know, thousands of contact. I remember I was on 10 meters one time and made, I think, almost 4,000 QSOs on 10 meters, but 63 countries. That's pretty low contact multiplier but that's the way it is in the Pacific. So anyway, after a while, I came back to the States and came to work back here and resumed my contesting once I got stations on the air and realized that I'd come back to Earth. You know, I was back there in not even in the middle of the pack. I was more towards the bottom. I'm primarily a DXer. Contesting is kind of a sidetrack to me from DXing. I've been working DX since I was a novice. I can remember when I got married a long time ago. I told my wife, I said, this is back in the 80s when I said, Heard, you got to understand, dear, Heard Island is on the air, and I need that as a new country. 2:00 in the morning, she could hear the key going on 20 meters, me kind of calling, but she's been that kind of a wife, accepting my ham radio hobby since then, and I'm pretty fortunate with that. I know that's a problem with a lot of people, but I have been in getting contests for a long time, and being a DXer primarily. Even now, I'm biased towards the contest, not the domestic contests. All I get them in them, the ones oriented with the DX, like CQ Worldwide, ARRL DX, and IARU, Work All Europe, and that sort of thing. And Worked All Europe, I only recently started getting interested in because I figured out how to send the QTCs. And keep track of them using the logging program, being able to repeat and all that sort of thing. So anyway, the question is why do I get on single band operations? Well, there's a few reasons behind it. One of the primary reasons is like Joe was talking about. It's in what do you call it? Butt in the chair time, right? Well, I've had arthritis for many years of rheumatoid arthritis, and you would call me a severe case, okay? But I still have up there in the mind, I have the competitive mind, but the physical part of it is just not really there. So I can operate 10 hours, and then I'm going to have to give up and make another effort in the morning. You know, if I, for instance, Joe on 160 meters, I get on there and operate like crazy. And I get to about the 2:00 in the morning area, and I say, well, is there that many multipliers coming from Europe for me as a low power entry? And I say, well, no, it's not worth. I'll pick them up Saturday night, and quite often it works that way. Another reason I get on single bands is antennas. I'm always experimenting. Well, and of course my antennas are DX oriented. On the high bands, all I have is tri-bander up on a low tower. And that works pretty well, you know, when the bands are open. But I've been concentrating lately on 80, sometimes 160, but 80 and 40 meters. And my antennas are low angle they're trying to be a low angle radiator. So like my 40-meter antenna is a semi vertical dipole. It's up about 70 feet and it's got like a crook in it so that it will stay pretty much vertical. On 80 meters, I have a T. It's a elevated vertical. It's about 10 feet at the bottom with a couple of radials on it. And then I have a aluminum T at the very top of it. And it's just like 5 feet on each side for a tiny bit of loading on the top of the vertical. But the trick behind that is if I want to get on there and compete with Joe on 160, when the season comes, I've got a pulley at the top. It's a wire antenna. It's number 12 gauge. I drop it down from the tree, and the T, I put some clamps on it, and I extend for top loading, and I give myself a T vertical there. And I already have the 160 meter radial sitting there doing nothing for 80 meters. So anyway, that's my my reason for getting on single bands is the lack of always having a full array of antennas for all the bands. So you don't want to get on 80 meters, say, when you've been, and in addition to that, I experiment. I use the NEC, the software Easy NEC, and always on the other computer over here, I'm always fooling around with models and that sort of thing. Not that I'm a particular good person at modeling, but I do experimenting and scale other antennas and that sort of thing. I'm always playing around, never satisfied. That's a problem. I'm never satisfied with what I have for antennas. So there's always a weak spot in my array of antennas. How do I, well, what band determines what I get on if I'm doing a single band? I do multi-band sometimes, not too often. And like Joe said, there's no point in operating with a full kilowatt on the other bands. You're just not going to stand a chance. And another thing that I do, similar to Joe, I don't take advantage of the assisted category that Joe does. For instance, a lot of people use cat control for their transceiver. I have the capability here, but I find it a distraction. I think it's my mindset in that I'm always wanting to work multipliers on whatever I'm doing, whatever band I'm on. I have a bias towards the multipliers, and I'm not looking for domestic QSOs as much because I've got the antennas for somewhat low angle radiation, and I'm weak in the domestic contest. Like the weekly CWTs from Oklahoma, I used to be able to run a little bit. I can't run from here. And I'll call everybody in this meeting here, I have to call 2 or 3 times. And meanwhile, they've worked, the competition, they've worked 3 for every one that I work. So that's pretty tricky to do that. But I do get into CWTs and work people. My approach to, I won't make it too long here, but my approach to working my single band entries is I search in pounds. It's almost all what I do. I search in pounds, tune up the band, down the band, looking for I concentrate on multipliers. In other words, if there's a pileup, I'll give a couple of calls to the pileup, and if I don't get them, I keep tuning. And you usually will set one of the VFOs, one of the 2 VFOs, to remember that frequency where that pilot was, and say, screw it, I'm going to go on. Work a few more, and it might flip back to that. Okay, they're still pretty heavy. And I might even take a mental note, is this a D expedition that's going to be on all the weekend? If so, I'll try to work them tomorrow and skip, it's a risk thing, where you're going to risk messing them all together and come back and get them later or not. I don't do one thing or another, but I almost always search in pounds. Why? Because I'm not successful running. It's just a fact. Rarely am I successful. I might be successful on 15 or 10 meters, when I've got an opening into Europe, and I'm working them like crazy. But that's my thing, is that I think I'm biased as a DXer because and I work for multipliers. That's a fault, really. I could probably do better in contests if I had an idea through the assisted category as to which ones, how I'm doing. I don't even look up and see how I'm running compared to the way I was an hour ago. What I do is just keep slugging on and do the best you can, because there's not a whole lot of control I have over that thing. Even in QRP, I've done quite well. QRP was looking for multipliers. Now I think my QRP days are over with, because I'm really concentrating on the last several entities for the auto roll DXCC. That's my primary thing. So I work in contests, and whatever I've got up in the air at the moment is what I'm going to use for contesting. But like I say, I don't have a big antenna system, and that's my limiting factor. Why am I successful? And sometimes I'm on a single band. It could be that a lot of times, for instance, on 10 meters, I'll get on there, being on the East Coast, not right on the coast, but on the East Coast. I can turn around. Sometimes, get an opening, 2 or 3 openings into multipliers in Africa. And I think a lot of people don't even work them. They opens up and I work them, and then in 10 meters, it's gone. So it boils down to a lot of it's luck. Luck is as much as skill as anything else, and determination. You won't find me working too many contests and more. I'm more at 6, 8, 10, maybe 12 hours. If I got something really going good, I might stay on, but usually I don't. So basically, I have fun. If I happen to do well, that's all is well. But I've done well on 160 meters at times. I've had antennas on 160 meters, like not the K2AV. There was a K2 up the Yankee Clipper Club, which had I changed my 40-meter dipole into basically a top-loaded dipole for 160 meters by extending the top and the bottom out to make it resonant on 160. Screwy wave angles, and you didn't really know what you're getting out of it, but it worked pretty well. And like I say, the vertical for 80 meters, I've done that, stretch it out to top loading for 160 meters. And, I use LMR 400 out in the woods. So even if you got a little SWR, you can deal with it, and it's not too much loss there. That's pretty much what I got there. Single band, have fun, try to get as many multipliers as I can. It's probably not the best way to go, if you're going to maximize your score, but I enjoy it. It's like working DX the whole time. CWTs, I don't do very well in. Hardly ever get in the ARRL sweepstakes. I get in it and play around with it, but it's a domestic contest, and I get kind of bored in it. You know what I mean? I feel robotic. But that's all I got, guys. Any questions about anything later on? Let me know.
Doug, thank you so much for that perspective. And you've it's very interesting because you've had enormous success, both single band operating and QRP, with basically very little running. So
it's not been very well. You can't run, really. You've got to be really lucky for that sort of thing. I looked, as a side note, I looked in my CQ or worldwide. You can go to the contest, CQ contest thing, and I looked up my call in the CQ worldwide, and it goes way back into the 1990s, right? I can't imagine the number of hours I've spent in the CQ worldwide contest over the years. I'm surprised I've got some roundness to my butt. It's got to be completely flat for all the hours that I spent in the chair.
Yeah.
It's amazing, really.
No, and that's a really interesting perspective to hear. Thanks, Doug.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there'll be questions for you later. Hey, we are going to go to our last presenter, Jeff, W4DD, who's had a lot of single band success, especially on 10 meters. And of course, over the years, lots of success. But I think you've won like 3 or 4 plaques in the last year. So we'll hand it over to you, Jeff.
Okay, I'm going to do a screen share here. Okay. All right. And you should see a blue slide. Is that correct?
Yep, we see it.
Okay, good. So I'm going to talk about the strategies I've used over the last 20, 25 years or so. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me. So first thing I'd say is set a reasonable objective. What do you want to accomplish with your contesting? You want to finish in the top 10. That was kind of one of my goals. I want to actually make the top 10 box in some of the magazines. Do you want to win a category, make the most QSOs in a contest? A lot of people really like total QSO counts. Do you want to make a lot of QSOs in a single band? That's a little different strategy. Maybe complete a DXCC or beat last year's score. And is this a single year goal, or are you going to want to come back year after year and try and improve it? So 2 most important things on this slide, you want to finish in the top 10, and will you try and improve what you've done this year, next year? So category decisions, you have to pick a band. In the question I asked myself, do I have a competitive intent on all 6 bands? And the answer was no, I do not. So I thought, well, single op, single band is probably my best choice if I want to really be competitive and hit the top 10 box in a couple of contests. And the second question I had to ask myself is power level. Do you want to go high, low, or QRP? And if you want to go high, you better have an amplifier that can kick out 1,500 watts for the whole contest. It's very fun to have that much power and have people answer you back or run stations, but it's also very competitive. You're going to have some big time competitors, and they're going to make lots of QSOs. You're going to have to be right in there with them. And you better make sure your air conditioning works, because if it doesn't, you're in for a pretty warm contest. I remember one of my good friends, W4PR up in Virginia, we were doing a multi-op up there one year, and it got sunny all of a sudden in October, and the sun was shining in the window and the sweat was pouring off his forehead as he was running stations. So you want to avoid that if at all possible. It makes the contest last much longer than just the 48 hours. Next question, do you want to go assisted or unassisted? I kind of prefer unassisted because I feel I can do pretty well unassisted, and I've developed some techniques for that, and they seem to work pretty good. And don't overlook joining a multi-op. You can learn a whole lot of stuff and have a whole lot of fun in a multi-operator contest, whether it's single transmitter, 2 transmitter, or multi-multi. There's a lot of good ops. You can listen to them run, and you learn a lot. You fix antennas, and like Joe was saying, it's 20 different balls in the air, and you have to juggle all of them, and you never know which ball is going to drop on the floor, and somebody has to step in and kind of pick it up. Your next question is going to be category choice. So I picked the ARRL CW DX contest that happens in the February-March timeframe. And I looked at what categories might you consider. And if you're an all band entry, of course, you have single op all the way through multi-multi. But on the single band entries, there's 6 bands, of course. There's 6 different categories for a total of 36 possible places you can enter. And it was rather interesting. I was surprised to see no QRP entry in 80 meters or as a single op QRP assisted. And I would think you could do actually pretty well in those categories because you can work the South American mults, the Caribbean mults, and maybe even a few Europeans. So there were entries in a lot of categories, but those 2 were lacking. Might be interesting sometime if conditions are good. So what decision did I arrive at? Well, for a number of years, I ran multi-multi at NQ4I's location, also W4PROs up in Virginia, and I was up to W3LPL one time. I now run unassisted. I kind of like doing unassisted. It's just too far to travel to a multi-op. Many times I can match the assisted ops on multipliers if the band isn't too wild. If I'm having to run and the band is wide open, it's really hard to keep up with all the multipliers. But if the band isn't too wild, I can kind of track the multipliers. I see a new signal on the band, I check it out, and I try to be very aware because a multiplier or two may win or lose you the contest. So kind of gauge the veracity of the contest. If it's really wild, you're going to have to run. And if it's a little slower, you have time to look for mults and make sure you're maximizing your multipliers. I have a pretty modest station here. I have a tower with 70 feet. It's now 90 feet. I ended up putting a monobander 5-element 10 meter at the top of that at 90 feet. That is by no means a very competitive contest station on 10 meters. There are people with stacks, 4 stacks or 3 stacks on 10 meters, and some of them are located on the East Coast and very good locations. The Northeast has a built-in advantage being closer to Europe, and I could see the difference moving from Virginia down to Georgia back 20 years ago. You could run Europeans up there like nothing. Down here, it's sometimes a struggle. If you're going to run high power, you're going to need some kind of an amp that'll churn out 1,500 watts for the 30 hours on a single band. Doesn't have to be fancy because you're not going to be changing bands all the time, but it does have to be capable of running something above a kilowatt, up to 1,500 watts if you want to be competitive in the high power category. As far as rigs, a few years back, I had an Orion 1. I love that. I could do single operator 2 VFO quite easily. So I could tune the second VFO listening for multipliers during the same time I was listening for responses to my CQs. I've since gone to a Flex, which is almost like a souped up Orion. The band scope is fantastic. I love that aspect, but I'm not yet proficient. And I know Mike's going to chastise me here for this, but I'm not yet proficient at single op 2 radio on the Flex. The Flex has kind of 2 radios built into it. So it's a good SO2R radio, but it's going to take a lot of practice to really master the human interface on the screen. So after many years of single op contesting, one of my goals was to win CQ Worldwide single operator, single band, 10 meter high power, both CW and sideband. And for the first time last year, I did that. So I was real happy. I've made lots of incremental improvements over the years in my station, reducing noise, improving the antenna, but I finally achieved that. And now I guess it's time for the next goal. One thing I'd like to do, I thanked him already, but Whiskey Echo 3 Charlie sponsors the plaques. I'm waiting for those to show up, and it'll be a kind of a high point in my contesting career. So in summary, consider what you like to do. Do you like to run? Do you like to work mults? You want to pursue the highest score? You have to kind of think this has to be fun, right? It can't just be a boring thing. Consider where your station plays best. That's really important because for a number of years I did single band 80 meters, and it's really hard to compete on that band with just a high inverted V or high dipole. You really need to think about where your station plays best, and you'll know that from running contests. You'll go, gee, I get a lot of answers on 20 meters or 15 meters or whatever. Learn from your mistakes. Every year I learned something new, something I usually screwed up. I didn't spend enough time running, or I should have chased the mults when the band started to open up, or what the case is. So learn from your mistakes. Really important is to make antenna improvements each year. So whatever you're doing as far as putting up antennas, think about what you might improve. And maybe it's an antenna. Just recently, I added a heavy-duty ground wire from my my station ground, which is the main floor of my house, down to my ground panel, which is where all my cables come in. And I noticed on 80 meters, the noise level dropped by a dB, and that was worth doing. So you just never know. You have to kind of think about the full, and I call it signal to noise ratio. So yeah, you want a big signal so you can run, but you also want a low noise level so you can hear and work those multipliers. And I've worked a heck of a lot of multipliers on 10 meters by just hearing them first. The Africans, the stations in the Indian Oceans, a lot of times I'll call them and they'll be so surprised to work a W4. It's like, W4, did I hear that right? So you want to make sure you're not giving up anything in your station to stuff you might actually be able to work pretty well. So be aware of that signal to noise ratio and try and work on both sides of that with antennas and also lowering your noise floor. Start your improvements long before the contest. You should be thinking about those now. We're about 3 months out of the CQ Worldwide. Why to test those now? Make sure the improvements behave like you think they're going to behave. Very important. And the other two guys mentioned this already, butt in seat for the entire contest. That's so important. And I also add, if you start a contest seriously, make sure you run the entire contest seriously. You don't know how conditions are going to be for the other competitors, if they're going to have good conditions, bad conditions. And there's a good number of times where I've lost by small margins and I've also won by small margins. So don't say, well, this isn't going well. Just stay in there, bang away. And if you want to do the contest just for fun, that's fine. But if you start it seriously, make sure you run the entire contest seriously. Some years propagation will be in your favor. Make sure you're ready for those good years because you don't get them every year. Sometimes somebody else has good propagation. And that's it.
All right, Jeff, fabulous. And congratulations on those plaques. Well deserved, and I mean really impressive from suburban Atlanta to win both of the 10-meter plaques this past season. I think we're ready for questions. I could probably think of some questions, but I bet you all have some. So we won't go formal, but if you have a question, just pipe on up. So Jeff, on 10 meters, I mean, you're just sitting there and I mean, you don't have any spots. So you're just tuning around looking for, I guess you have the band scope, right, from the Flex, but there's a lot of looking, right, for the multipliers and for the contacts.
Yeah, and I've developed a technique I didn't realize I would when I bought the Flex. It has a really cool feature. So what you can do is you can tune around with the Flex, and when you see a station, you can do a spot only to your computer. In other words, I'm not connected to the internet, but I can spot that station on the band scope, and it will actually appear on the band scope with the Flex. While I work up the band, I've ID'd every station kind of while I'm listening to my CQs and things, and I go back to receive. I can ID every station. I don't have to go back and ever hit that station again unless I see a new signal on the band somewhere. Saves me a huge amount of time, and I've matched K3LRs and W3LPLs multiplier count over the last few years just by using that technique. So it's kind of like having packet spotting, but you're doing all the spotting yourself. You simply don't have to go back and reinvent the wheel every pass up the band.